All right, now that we've got our htaccess file set up, now we can start getting into some of the handling of this. So I'm going to show you the structure that I sort of created for this. Obviously, you can kind of do this your own way, but this is just sort of what I like to do, what I did. So in our Rourke folder, we're going to create a new folder called lib, and this is where we're going to keep a lot of our sort of application-centric type files. And then inside of this, we'll create a new folder called class, and this is where we're going to store all the classes that we create and use. And then inside of this, we'll create a file called Rourke, and that'll be rourke.php. Rourke's going to be our main class for our template handling and so forth. And so we need to make sure that we have that over in our index.php file. So what I'm going to do a couple things. One, I'm going to drop in this code right here. Essentially what this does is it just makes us so as we're developing this, we can see all of the errors. Of course, for production, you would get rid of this. And then we're going to do a require statement. So we're going to do require once, and we're going to use dir. This is just like doing dir name and then file. So it's going to give us the path to the current directory, and then dot, and then /lib/class/rourke.php. So what we just, the file we just created, we're going to include that. And then we're going to do Rourke equals new Rourke. And we haven't created this class yet, but we're about to. So we're loading in our Rourke file, and then we're instancing a new instance of that particular file. And then that is where we are going to, if we open up rourke.php, then this is where we are going to do the bulk of our handling and so forth. So we'll create a new class called Rourke, and the first thing that we need, we're going to have a series of properties for this, but the first one that we need is going to be slug. Now, there's probably some debate that we could have about whether it should be private or protected, etc., etc. I usually just start off as protected unless unless something comes up in my coding that I need to make it private, or I need to make it public. That pushes me one way or the other. That way, they're going to be available inside of this class and any child classes or any classes that extend it. And that sort of, to me, seems like, for me, is the default position. So that's what we have here. And then we're going to create a constructor, and we're actually going to do some things in our constructor. And matter of fact, most of the work is going to be done inside of the constructor. So the first thing that we need to do is, if you remember, we have this path here now that was requested. Well, now we need to start analyzing that and breaking it down and figuring out what was being requested. And so the term I'm using is slug. And so what we want to do is we want to get the slug from that query parameter. So we would create a method called we're going to set this slug equal to something, a function we're going to create or a method we're going to create in this class, and we'll call it slug from, or we could just really just call this get slug. Okay, so we're going to say get slug is going to be the name of our function here, and then we need to actually write this function slug. Again, I'm defaulting to protected unless I end up having some other reason not to. And we're doing get slug. And then in get slug, what we're going to do is we're going to use that query parameter. So we're going to use query equals, and I'm going to use filter input. The reason I use filter input, and we're going to use input get, and we're going to do q. The reason I do filter input is because if the query parameter doesn't exist, it doesn't throw an error. It just returns null. So I don't have to do an if statement and is set and all that. I can just do filter input, and it sort of takes care of all of that for me. So we're going to get that query parameter, and here, if we just, at this point, if we just echoed query like this, if we've done everything right up to this point, we should just get, and let's see. So something's wrong with our, oh, I forgot to put function. Function. I do that a lot. So here, and we forgot it down here, put function. Okay. And so here we have what our query parameter was now, just echoed out. Okay, so that's a start. So we've got it now captured into this query variable here. And then from here, we just need to sort of break it down and figure out what it is. Okay, so the first thing is we want to check and see if it's empty. Because if we go, so here we're on this path right here, but if I go to just Rourke like this to the root, you'll see it's empty. There's nothing there. Okay, so that needs to be handled because that is our home page. So we should be displaying something there. That's not a 404 or anything like that. So what we're going to do is I like to be sort of, I'm going to use the word verbose a lot, which essentially means sort of really drawing things out in the code. So I'm going to really sort of be specific about all this. So I'm going to do if false equals query or null equals query. So we're basically checking for false or null, and filter input returns null if it doesn't exist and false if it tries to run the filter and the filter fails. Now in this case, I didn't pass in a filter, right? This third parameter is where you'd put in some sort of filter. Like filter default is what it does by default if you don't pass anything in. And what filter default does is nothing. It essentially it uses filter unsafe raw, which doesn't filter the parameter at all, which is what I want. I don't need it for what we're doing here. I don't need it filtered. I just want to make sure it exists. So, but if for some reason it tries to use filter unsafe raw and filter and returns false, then something's going on there because it shouldn't do that. So I'm just checking for both conditions here, and if either one of those is met, I'm actually going to return not false but home, because now we know we're on our home page. Okay, so we've got our first bit of handling, and we could do something like this. Echo home, and now I'm on the home page here, and we see we get home. If I go to say /about, well, then I don't get it because I'm not on the home page anymore. Okay, so that's, again, our first sort of bit of handling. All right, but if that's not, if it's not basically empty, then we still need to sort of handle it. And so knowing where, I sort of know where I'm going with this, there are certain URL, the thing about this is there's going to be certain URL structures you support and ones you don't. That's why if you look at an application like WordPress, when you go into the permalink settings, you have to tell it what structure you want it to use, because you have to tell it what structures you want to support. And so in here, we're just sort of doing that in the code, okay? You could, of course, abstract that out and so forth, but in our case, we're just going to do it in the code since we don't have a database and all that sort of thing. So the sort of one catch to all of this is you're going to have post pages that will have just a single slug, like if the name of the page is cat, it would be Rourke/cat. And if it's or you'll have a page like /about, but you might also have categories that would be /category/dog. So you need to handle both of those situations. So what we can do is I'm just going to do parts equal to, we're going to explode what we get from the string that we got. So we'll actually turn this back to return, and we're going to explode it. And we're going to explode it on slashes, because to be able to essentially deal with categories. So if we do print r and parts, and on the home page, we're not going to get anything because that we already handled that situation. But if we do say /dog, which might be the name of a post, or let's do /about, you see that we just get an array with about in it. However, if I do category /dog, I get an array that has category and dog in it. So we're breaking apart the URL and we're getting a structure that we can start to work with. Okay, so now we have an array that has the parts of the URL broken down by /. So there's a couple things here. We're only supporting categories, and that's only going to break the query that we grabbed, the path, into a max of 2 parts, right? You're only going to have category /dog. You wouldn't have category /dog/cat, right? That wouldn't make any sense. So, and we don't need to support that for any reason. So what we're going to do is we're going to get the count of how many items are in our array. So we're going to use the count function in PHP, and we're going to pass in parts. That'll tell us how many elements are in that. If count is greater than 2, well, we know that that's an invalid URL or one unsupported URL, because in our category, the most we will ever support here is 2, and everything else, our post pages, our admin pages, and so forth, those are all just going to be 1 element. So they're not going to be greater than 2. So anything greater than 2 is an unsupported URL, and what we can do is we can return 404 for the slug. Okay, so right now, again, all we're doing is figuring out what the slug is. So we've got home. We've now got a 404 here. So if it's greater than 2, we'll return a 404. Otherwise, if count is equal to 2, well, now we know we've got a category. And so we can do a couple things. Now, we could assume that this was category. However, maybe down the line you want to do tag like this. And this might give me an error so again, that assuming that is a category isn't necessarily the right thing to do here. So what we'll do is we'll just check it. We'll see if parts 0 is equal to category. Now we know if this is true that we have a category here. So if parts 0, so the element in the first part right here, which in this case now is tag, but it will be category in reality. So if it is that, then we're going to return, and I'm going to use sprintf, and the format is going to be category dash, and then our placeholder like this. And then we're going to put in parts 1. Okay, so so what this is going to do, if let's just echo slug up here, since it'll be a little bit easier. So when we're on a category page, or actually if we're on a tag page like this, it's not going to do that. You see no slug is set because nothing's matching at this point. If we go to category /dog, and let's see, this slug. If we go to category, then we get category -dog. If we go back to tag, then that should give us 404. Okay, so this is, you can see we're starting to get somewhere or figure out what these are. Now I'm doing category /dog so that later on I know that I'm dealing with a category, and that'll become important a little bit later. The last thing here then, the last condition here is going to be essentially everything else. And everything else, we're just going to get the last item here, and I'll show you. Essentially, because we've done anything greater than 2 is a 404. That means 2 to infinity is handled. Then we did it's equal to 2. That means 2 is handled. So 2 and greater than 2 is handled. Well, what's below that is 1, and that's what this is. So if there's only one element, that means we're not on a category. We're on something like our about page, like this. And in that case, we're just going to get that slug. So we're using array pop because there's only one element in that array, because again, we're literally checking for that here. It's just going to grab that one element and return that as the slug. So, and then of course you always put in, I'm going to return false. If for some reason we get through all that and none of this catches, we'll just return false because something's not right. Okay, so we've started to now sort of get into breaking down and handling our URL and analyzing it. We figured out if it's the home page, if we should, or if it's a 404 page, if it's a category page, or if it's a post or a post or a page. We're gonna have both posts and pages, which are kind of like admin pages, like an about and a contact and so forth. Okay, so that's what getSlug does. It takes that query URL and starts to do some initial analyzing from that, and then from there we can start to get into getting more specific about figuring out what content we need, what templates we want to load, and all that sort of thing. Hopefully you're enjoying the course up to this point. Now, if you'd like to keep going and finish it off, all my courses are available on Skillshare. And not only will you get access to all of my courses, but over 20,000 others on web design and web development, freelancing, graphic design, online marketing, and more. And it's all for just $10 a month. And as a teacher on Skillshare, I can give you a 2-month free trial. You'll get full access to the entire library of courses, and you can cancel at any time before the trial is up, and you'll never be charged a penny. To learn more and to start your 2-month free trial, head on over to johnmorrisonline.com/Skillshare.